greatest military coup ever could now be underway on U.S. soil. By thelastgreatstand.com. In yesterday's post titled, Obama Talks Martial Law, Texas Takeover, and Conspiracy Theory, you were introduced to just how sick a set of rules Obama plays by. There is not a moral or ethical fiber anywhere in his person. Just when it seemed like there was no one anywhere willing to stand up to the president who behaves like a sixth-grade schoolgirl, it turns out a whistleblower has stepped forward, somewhat reluctantly, and revealed that the plans of the New World Order, the Bilderbergs, the Illuminati, etc., all of which obviously include Obama, are in for a serious smackdown if what this whistleblower says is true. Based on how easily some of the information could be verified, and given who the host of the video below is, I'm going to take the man at his word at the very least for the portions involving the International Court of Justice. The interview begins with David Wilcock interviewing a remarkable new whistleblower, going by the name Drake for the time being. The subject of the interview is a series of mass arrests set to take place across the globe in the very near future, primarily in the G5 countries. The interview is about 2 hours, but once Drake gets into the meat of the topic, the time flies. When I first began listening, I made the assumption the mass arrests being referred to would be the arrest of citizens with the potential to be troublemakers, most likely from the government threat list which names 8 million Americans to be detained as soon as martial law imposed. According to Drake, we are about to witness the largest coup in history, and those being arrested will be the global elites, or the New World Order, whatever you wish to call them. Until Drake's testimony, the only media personality other than Wilcock who had referred to a mass arrest scenario of the global elites, has been Benjamin Fulford. Both have contacts both deep within the Pentagon at the highest levels. Wilcock's source, again, a very senior official within the Pentagon, vetted Drake for over 4 hours, and concluded the story he tells in the interview below is 100% accurate. After all, Wilcock's source should know, because the vast majority of the military is on board with this coup. The entire interviews is below, and I cannot suggest listening to it for yourself enough, but in the meantime I'll do my best to summarize the whole thing as briefly as possible. The name of the group that Drake has been affiliated with is called Freedom Reigns, and you can find archived material at freedomreigns.us. The focus of Freedom Reigns has been on the subject of nation-states. However, it is important you realize that any group using the term nation-state as part of their name is a fraud. Freedom Reigns has no official group roster, no leader, no database, and no one knows everyone else involved, and that is done as a security precaution. Much like I often refer to the American public as headline readers and soundbite seekers, because if the news doesn't fit in a tweet or on a bumper sticker, most people skip it. Drake chastises the American people for becoming so lazy that they've become incapable of vetting information for themselves when they hear it. Drake also chastises websites like mine, or like Alex Jones, accusing us of promoting fear porn, but until now, there was nothing to suggest the events we have been witnessing could be stopped. Because so many of us have been conditioned to cry bullshit no matter what we hear, and rightfully so most of the time, when events do begin to unfold. Drake said the vast majority of people will mistake the military and those who are the good guys for our enemy, which is partly why he has come forward to speak now. As I said up top, the main topic of the interview involves nation-states. Due to space constraints, you can always listen for yourself. I am going to fly through much of the legal portion of how the majority of the United States have already declared their sovereignty and disengaged from the corporation known as the United States of America, and they have done so rather slyly. To make a long story short, a group traced the origins of all law as far back as the Sumerian tablets from roughly 11,000 years ago. That form of law was known as ecclesiastic law, which later evolved into canon law, and the combination of the two formed English common law, which our own system is based on. The group discovered that provided a piece of property is correctly registered and boundaries clearly discerned, representatives from the group habituating there can declare the land to be a sovereign nation. Without going into detail, the research team and legal scholars came to the conclusion Furthermore, all that is required to declare one's land sovereign is notification to the International Court of Justice, French, Cour internationale de justice, commonly referred to as the World Court or ICJ, is the primary judicial branch of the United Nations. It is based in the Peace Palace in The Hague, Netherlands. Its main functions are to settle legal disputes submitted to it by states and to provide advisory opinions on legal questions submitted to it by duly authorized international branches, agencies, and the UN General Assembly. Once the notification process is complete, the sovereign nation becomes part of a publication, and gets listed by the UN in an international newspaper. Apparently, the first attempt was made in Pennsylvania, and upon getting their receipt back from the International Court of Justice, several very high-ranking members of the Pentagon showed up asking questions. The most pressing questions: could it be done again all around the country? By the end of February 2015, the International Court of Justice had processed and already sent back receipts to the majority of U.S. states. Here is where things get extremely interesting. In order to be able to disengage from the Corporation of the United States of America, each sovereign nation had to have a constitution, one that agreed with 1787 Constitution completely. It had to agree with original 13th Amendment, contain the Bill of Rights, the Articles of Confederation, and the Declaration of Independence. By declaration their sovereignty, disengagement, or their effort to remove themselves, individual states, from the corporate U.S. government, it had the legal effect of rebirthing the Declaration of Independence, which clearly states on page 2 that if the government gets out of control, the people have the right to take care of the problem. The manner and format of using those documents, original founding documents, in conjunction with a meeting of representatives of a representative state gave people the right to make the declaration for their independence. That, then gives them the authority, the civilian authority, to take actions as necessary to back up the civilian action taken, or in other words, defend itself. Not only did the majority of the states complete this process by February, but many of the Native American Indian nations were included as well. As of right now, the majority of the United States has been set free from the corporate government legally, on an international basis. In the interest of space, you'll have to trust me that it doesn't conflict with the Constitution. Listen to the interview for the full details. The final package with the majority of the states came at one time, and by the time the last few stages were playing out, the global elites had caught on. They did their best to stop the process, but were unsuccessful. According to Drake and the insiders at the Pentagon, if martial law is declared, somewhere between 80 to 90% of the military has agreed to go AWOL. Once the arrests begin, the precedent set will be for the civilians to control the military controls the federal marshals, and the federal marshals support local law enforcement. Those actively involved in carrying out these arrests hope to disrupt daily life as little as possible, so martial law will not be declared, as no one expects much of a serious fight from the old crusty elites. My choice of words. At this point, the global elites have been so severely weakened financially, they could never come close to mounting an attack against actual law enforcement. For evidence of just how broke they are, one need not look farther than all the bailouts. They certainly did not do that out of the kindness of their hearts. There is obviously a great deal more discussed in the interview, and in much deeper detail, so I encourage you to listen and share with a friend. Drake says that when the time comes, local broadcasting will be commandeered, and announcements will be made to cut down on the panic of the populace. If you listen to Benjamin Fulford or David Wilcock regularly, you know that their connections within the Pentagon are solid. Let's all hope and pray for a safe and speedy end to this vaccination of our planet from all the filth that has ruled over it for centuries. Conservative Tribune. Donald Trump recently entered the Syrian refugee debate and had some bold things to say about the crisis. The Republican presidential front-runner spoke with Fox News' Eric Bolling on Cash-In about the issue. During the interview, Trump expressed his deep concern about potentially letting jihadists come into the country as refugees. They were talking about 3,000 people coming, he told Bolling. Then I heard 10,000. Then I heard 25,000, then I heard 200,000 people. And Eric, if you look at this migration, it's mostly men, Trump said. And they look like young men, and strong men, and they look like fighters. Trump said he wondered why aren't they fighting for their own country, Syria? He went on to say, this could be one of the greatest military coups of all time. Trump obviously wasn't talking about a domestic military overthrow of the government, but a surprise attack from a foreign enemy, as indicated when he said, some of the immigrants, definitely in my opinion will be ISIS. Trump warned that accepting refugees in our attempt at humanitarianism could be like accepting a Trojan horse. Many migrants, including Islamic militants, would come to an unprepared United States. He further pointed out that the United States is a debtor nation that owes $19 trillion, and our infrastructure is outdated. Obama wants to bring 200,000 people here, Trump said. If I win the election, they are going back. They're going back. Under a Trump administration, instead of transferring these migrants to European countries or the U.S., free zones, safe zones would be set up in Syria for these people. Trump pointed out that the Persian Gulf states aren't accepting anybody. And they are right there, he said. We have a big problem in this country. Please like and share on Facebook and Twitter and tell us what you think about Trump's comments on the Syrian refugee crisis. Date Monday, October 5, 2015, by Brandon Turville. A recent poll conducted by YouGov revealed that a sizable portion of the American public is open to the idea of a military coup in the United States. The poll was conducted amid the continual polling that takes place during the U.S. presidential election, yet it did not focus on the elections per se, but the potential lack of elections in the future. The YouGov poll surveyed 1,000 people online and determined that 29% of Americans, over a quarter of the population, could imagine supporting a military coup against the civilian government. Only 41% could not imagine supporting a coup. The numbers supporting a potential coup are highest among Republicans, with 43% of them saying they could envision supporting a coup. 29% of independents followed, with Democrats trailing at 20%. The numbers apparently increased in support when the question asked whether they would hypothetically support the military stepping in to take control from a civilian government which is beginning to violate the Constitution. Critics of the polls have suggested that the method used to conduct the survey was largely unscientific and not a reasonable representation of an accurate sampling of the general American public. Regardless of how it was conducted, the real question here is, why was this poll conducted in the first place? Why are Americans being asked if they would support a military coup? After all, in the past, whenever a critic of the government would suggest such a possibility, that individual was laughed off the stage as being paranoid and hyperbolic. We are told military coups are not an option in the United States and, being the exceptional nation, we are outside of history. We are told that the very idea that a military coup could ever take place is laughable. So, why the poll? Indeed, as the KWSP has asked, who commissioned it? Was it ordered up by a clique of ambitious and disgruntled military men eager to redeem their defeats on the battlefield with some kind of seizure of power here in the United States? Up to now, we do not know these answers. The question is thus, are the American people being prepped to accept a military coup in the United States and the subsequent martial law that will almost inevitably follow such a seizure of power? Was this poll conducted for the benefit of the oligarchs who would perpetuate this coup? Not likely, since the Pentagon and the military government intelligence apparatus already has extravagant ways of knowing whether or not the American people are receptive to coups. Was it merely an exercise in predictive programming and trend-setting polling data, the same method that is used in color revolutions, to create a sense of social consensus and promote the idea that the majority supports a specific idea? But the United States is not the only country that has had talk of military coups as of late. Upon the election of Jeremy Corbyn as leader of the UK Labour Party, a senior serving general opined that, if Corbyn was ever elected as Prime Minister, the military might simply remove him from power. According to a report by the London Daily Mail, a senior serving general, speaking anonymously to the Sunday Times, said Mr. Corbyn's victory has been greeted with wholesale dismay in the army. He added, there would be mass resignations at all levels and you would face the very real prospect of an event which would effectively be a mutiny. Feelings are running very high within the armed forces. You would see a major break-in convention with senior generals directly and publicly challenging Corbyn over vital important policy decisions such as Trident, pulling out of NATO and any plans to emasculate and shrink the size of the armed forces. The army just wouldn't stand for it. The General Staff would not allow a Prime Minister to jeopardize the security of this country, and I think people would use whatever means possible, fair or foul, to prevent that. You can't put a maverick in charge of a country's security. Corbyn's plans and reforms are relatively mild on many accounts. However, that is apparently enough to justify the seizure of total power by the military in the minds of some. It also echoes the past claims by retired Army General Paul Valley, a friend of accused pedophile and avowed Satanist Michael Aquino, that he had answered a call asking if he would lead a coup against the civilian government if he were provided with 250,000 Marines. Valley responded that, yes, he would indeed lead a coup if the conditions were right. While it remains to be seen what plans are being set in motion for the future of civilian governments in the United States and the UK, it is greatly concerning that convenient polls regarding military coups are being conducted and disseminated amongst the public while serving and retired military officials talk openly of the same act of treason. As discontent grows with higher unemployment, increased immigration, more foreign wars, higher food prices, and lower living standards, it is apparent that the ruling elite in both the United States and the UK, actually one and the same, are preparing to ensure that such discontent will be crushed and that no reforms, however modest, will ever be allowed to move forward. Americans and British people must understand what is at stake before it is too late.